We open with the breaking and tragic news of a terrorist shooting attack near Hebron, in which an Israeli woman was killed and a man seriously wounded. 42-year-old Batsheva Nigri was identified as the victim, who was shot dead in front of her 12-year-old daughter, who was uninjured. Security forces launched a search for the gunman and continue their intensive manhunt to find the terrorists responsible for the shooting murder of an Israeli father and son in Aq-raba. An Israeli woman was shot dead and another man was seriously wounded in a terror attack close to the southern Judea city of Hebron. The pair apparently came under fire from another car while driving on the Route 60 highway. The Magen David Adom ambulance service said it treated the pair, a man and a woman in their 40s, at the Beit Chagai junction. The woman was later declared dead at the scene. The wounded man was taken to the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba for treatment. IDF troops were dispatched to the scene and launched a manhunt for the shooters. The attack came 2 days after a Palestinian terrorist murdered 2 Israeli men. A father, Shai Nigreki, and his son, Aviad Nir, were shot to death in a car wash in Aq-raba on Saturday afternoon. The searches continue near Nablus, with the Aq-raba terrorist believed hiding in the outskirts of the city. During the night, security forces entered the village of Aq-raba, south of Nablus, and arrested suspects. The IDF launched a pursuit after the suspect's car blocked main roads and collected security camera footage from nearby cameras. In a separate incident, an Israeli man was attacked and lightly hurt by Palestinians after mistakenly entering the Palestinian town of Turmus Aya. The man's car was set on fire, and Palestinians also hurled stones at the victim. IDF troops arrived at the scene, entering the town, and extracted the man. Following the recent attacks, the IDF warned visitors that while arriving in Palestinian villages isn't illegal, it's ill-advised to do so. And in a separate security development, the IDF has released video from an Iron Dome air defense successfully intercepting a drone over the Gaza Strip. The unmanned aircraft was spotted flying toward Israel west of the southern Gaza town of Rafiah. The IDF said that the UAV did not cross into Israeli territory and was tracked from the moment it took off. The statement added that the drone did not pose any threat to Israeli residents. There were no alerts activated, according to policy. And after overcoming objections raised by Finance Minister Smotrich, the government has approved a massive 3.2 billion shekel plan for public infrastructure and education in eastern Jerusalem. We get more in this report from ILTV's William Sharon.
The government's approval of the plan is for the benefit of the Arab neighborhoods of part of the Israeli capital captured in 1967 war. It comes 2 weeks after Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich announced he was freezing the funding pending a checking mechanism to ensure the funds are not mislocated. The government has now approved the 3.2 billion shekel plan for the public infrastructure and education in eastern Jerusalem. Netanyahu released a statement as well as saying, "Our government cares for all citizens and residents of the State of Israel, and it straightens our policy in favor of a united and strong Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty."
אנחנו גם לא שוכחים לרגע את ירושלים, והמחויבות שלנו לעזור לכל תושביה. הממשלה תקבל היום החלטה חשובה לטובת תושבי מזרח ירושלים. אני שמח וגאה שההחלטה שנקבל היא בגובה של 3 מיליארד שקלים. זה הרבה יותר גבוה מכל סכום שתוקצב קודם לכן לשירותים אזרחיים במזרח העיר.
The newly approved plan for the mostly Arab side of the city includes funding from public infrastructures, reform of health, care facilities, reform of welfare, increase of public security, employment opportunities, and working to increase the number of receiving education certifications. Funding will also go towards improving roads and public transportation, Hebrew language education encouragement, entrepreneurship, and the establishment of startups. To combat a house crisis in the area, there is a funding for 2,000 new apartments for each of the next 5 years. Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon said, "The decision proves in practice that East Jerusalem is an inseparable part of Jerusalem."
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team. as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
And joining us now to discuss the massive investment in East Jerusalem is Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan Nachum. It's a massive sum of money, but Eastern Jerusalem has suffered so much neglect over the years. Will it make a real impact?
Well, absolutely. First of all, it's not the first time that such huge, significant amounts of funds are being invested in East Jerusalem. This started 10 years ago when Zev Elkin, as the Minister for Jerusalem Affairs, said something very smart. He said, you can't on the one hand say that Jerusalem is one united capital, and on the other hand, completely neglect and underfund and under-resource an entire part of the city. And so this already has been happening for 7 to 10 years. The last investment 5 years ago was 2 billion shekels. Then last year they came up with a new plan, which has now been replaced by this plan, which is going to be 2024 for 5 years on. And it's very exciting because the whole idea is to close gaps, infrastructural gaps, social gaps, educational gaps, employment gaps. And so you need significant amounts of funds to be able to do that. And so we're thrilled, and the mayor has been working very closely with the Ministry for Jerusalem Affairs and with the Finance Ministry to get this done.
Well, I mean, how long do you expect it to take? If you were to look towards the future, how many years from now would you say that East and West Jerusalem will kind of feel the same? Will that never happen?
That's an interesting question. First of all, I don't think we want them to feel the same. The beauty of the city of Jerusalem is that every neighborhood feels different and has its own character. And I think that's something to preserve and to celebrate. The question is, how do we close gaps? And so let me just tell you, without looking ahead, what we did in the last few years. So, the biggest problem is underemployment or not enough workforce participation of Arab women in East Jerusalem, mainly for the fact that they've had a terrible education, the Palestinian Authority education, where more than 80% of the children are studying, which means they don't learn Hebrew. So the women are not learning Hebrew. The men start working when they're young and they learn Hebrew on the streets. And so what we had was the lowest workforce participation of Arab women in the entire country, of any women in the entire region, even lower than Saudi Arabia. In the last 5 years, Steve, we've moved the numbers from 19% to 25%, still low. But it means that these funds, these resources have an impact. We are moving the needle, we have moved the needle, and we will continue to move the needle to a very positive place.
You're a political figure, deputy mayor, and there's going to be municipal elections pretty soon. There are hundreds of thousands of Arab residents of the city. Almost none of them vote. Might this sort of help at least bring them out to the ballot box? I don't care for which party, just to bring them out to become citizens that take part in the democratic process locally?
You're 100% right. They have, of course, the right to vote, and only 3% exercise that right. And you have to understand, it's very easy for us to sit here. We have a Western culture of democracy. In East Jerusalem, they get harassed by Hamas and by the Palestinian Authority not to vote. They're under enormous pressure not to vote. They send in the press warnings, don't dare vote. So it's easy to us who have always lived in a free and fair society to say, come out to vote, but there is actually a consequence for them. The question is, how do we remove the radical elements from East Jerusalem so that people feel comfortable to vote? And when they do vote, maybe they'll vote for some Arab representatives for city council, which means that they'll be able to also advocate for more resources for themselves.
We're just about out of time, Fleur, but I wanted to ask you this. We like to say it's the united capital of Jerusalem forever. When do you think we can actually reach a point where all parts of the city feel fully integrated as one city?
So, like I mentioned earlier, I think the beauty of Jerusalem is that we're a city of different communities.
Different communities, but one city.
And we love that. Now, the question is not that, Steve. The question is, when I speak to the average East Jerusalemite and somebody says to them, you know, if there is ever a division, what side do you want to be on? 95% of the ones that talk to me quietly say, we want to be on your side. So is it a united city? I'm not saying everybody's excited about it, but for the most part, this
All
is
right,
very much a
I'm sorry that leaves us out of time. It was my fault for throwing in the last question. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, so much for joining us.